Welcome, everyone. I see that people are joining. Let me see if everyone can see me or hear me. Would be good if you can let me know if you can hear me or see me. Okay, great, Bo. Thank you very much. Very good to see you all here in the first webinar of 2024. And in 2024, we will have a strong focus on realizing sustainability objectives. And today, what I'd like you to do is share with you what we did in the last quarter of last year related to working with our whole community, the Fleetforum community, on committing on specific sustainability objectives and what does that mean for our community for this year. So first of all, introduce the commitments, sustainability commitments, but also looking at what does that mean for our community? What does it mean for our activities in this year? It's great to see so many people here, and it's good that you all can hear me. And I see Moses already, you gave a great example. Would be great if you can let you know your name, the organization you work for, the country you work from, so we have a bit of an idea of who is in the call today. As you might know, is that it is also always possible to watch this webinar with a subtitle in the language you prefer. So what I will do is send you all a link and invite you to Wordly. And if you click or accept that link, if you think, well, English is not my favorite language to listen to, then you can use that app and let's say choose the language that you want, and you will have it subtitled in the language of that you prefer. If you think I'm completely comfortable with English, just don't use the link, don't use the app, and just stick to let's say the English that we use here. So great. What I will do in the next, let's say 20 minutes, give you an overview of the commitments and what does it mean, and then we will have some room for questions and answers. I can already promise you that there will be much more topics in this webinar that we can go into detail. So it's a high overview of what's happening, what you can expect this year, what we think that you can do yourself, and many of the topics that I will cover today will be, let's say, the topic that we discuss in detail in the next, let's say, webinars during the course of this year. Okay. So if you have any questions, just let me know in the chat, or there is a Q&A box as well. So if you use the Q&A box, if you have any questions, then we will have the time to answer these questions. So what I will do is share my screen. Great. Cool. All right. I hope you can all see my screen, and we will talk, like I said, on the sustainability commitments and what does that mean. So you see here on this picture, it's a picture of the Fleetforum Summit in October. And what happened in the Fleetforum Summit in October, a group of our representatives of our member organizations all signed the commitments, sustainability commitments, that they say, okay, we as a community and also as an individual organization, we really want to work on reducing our emissions, and we do commit to specific commitments. So what are these commitments? And many of you work for organizations, whether I see some of you were actually present in Geneva during the meeting, and some of you work for organizations where your global fleet manager or your global logistics manager was present in Geneva and on behalf of your organization signed these commitments. So if we look at the commitments that, let's say, 70% of our member organizations signed, it's three very, let's say, clear commitments. The first one is on setting a baseline and setting a target. A baseline is actually knowing what your current fleet or road transport emissions are, carbon emissions specifically. That's the baseline. Secondly, the targets. So what is it? What's your target? What's your objective for reduction of emissions in the coming 2, 3, 5, 10 years? As an organization, you can decide what you want. So the organizations that committed to within, if we don't have it yet, because half the organizations already have it, within a year. So that means by October of this year, 2024, we will have a baseline set and we will have an objective for, let's say, reduction of emissions of fleet. Two other commitments, objectives is within 5 years, 25% of our vehicles will be Euro 3 or higher. The second one on vehicle sharing, within 3 years, our organization participates in vehicle sharing initiatives in at least 20% of our operating countries. So let's go into it a little more detail in the three commitments, but also, well, what are supporting activities that we are going to deliver, execute, collaborate on, and also, well, what are the initial ideas of what you can do. First, let's look into insight and targets. A very quick poll of all of you. For some organizations we do know, some we don't, but just use the chat and say, do you have insight in your current carbon emissions of your road transport? And if you're from a head office perspective, do you know it from the whole organization? If you're responsible for the fleet in a region or in a country, they say, okay, do you have insight? Let's say in the current emissions of your road transport. So who has already insights? Yeah, I know exactly what it means. I know exactly what my, let's say, current emissions are. It would be interesting to see, to hear from you, and just use the chat and send it to everyone. You say, okay, yeah, I do have insight in my current emissions. See, Martin says, partly building global data is great. Moses, know your current emissions. That's very good. Then you're already a step ahead compared to a lot of other of your colleagues. And let's see, who else wants to share whether you already have, let's say, insight in your current emissions. Yes, I say yes. Implementing it, very good. I know the current emissions using the Clean Fleet Toolkit, very good. Yes, not yet, but in the process, very good. Rounding off our baseline calculations, yeah. It's not an easy task, I do realize that. We know, yes, we have insight at global level, we are working on it. So what we see here is that, and that already also came out of a survey that we did last year, about half of the organizations do have insight in your current emissions, what we call the baseline. And it's good to see that the ones who do not have it yet say, well, we are in the process, or like Farah said, we are working on it. Then secondly, also use the chat. Do you have a target? So you might have a target, let's say organization-wide overall, but what's interesting, do you have a target, you, within your own responsibility, whether it's global or country or region, do you have a specific target for reduction of carbon emissions of your road transport? So we see about 50% does have a baseline, and here we see whether people do have, yes, we have a global targets as well. Most of it, yes, also a global target. So there's a lot of global targets I see. And I can assume that the majority of the global targets are an overall target for the organization of the reduction of emissions. And I see, very good, Moses, you even have a field office target. That really is a great achievement. And that's why 3.5% reduction is my target. Very good. And so, like I said, some of you will have a global target for the overall reduction of emissions of your organization, and would be interesting to also get a clear insight, if you don't have it yet, if that is being broken down into what does it mean for road transport, or what does it mean for fleet? So is there a specific target for these, let's say, for road transport? So going back again to the baseline. So like I said, 50% of you do have a baseline. That means that you do have a method, whether you use the Fleetform Clean Fleet tool, or you have other methods that's being used within your organization. So if there is a method within your organization to calculate emissions, to set the baseline, well, it's great. Use it. It's easy because the work's been done. The preparation work has already been done. The moment you say, I want to get insight in my current emissions, but there's no method within my organization, then the Fleetform Clean Fleet Toolkit is a perfect toolkit that can help you to, let's say, determine your current emissions and set your baseline. And in the email we will send after the webinar, you will also find the link to the Clean Fleet Toolkit, which is a web-based tool that you can use. And based on your current fleet, the composition of your fleet, the tool calculates for you all your emissions, but also your carbon emissions. Okay, then looking at targets. Most of you do have a target. And I also see that most of you have a global target. It doesn't mean that you have a target for yourself. And especially if the target is, let's say, a reduction of overall emissions of your organization, it would be good for yourself to get an idea on what you could achieve. And the best way to do it is really looking at what kind of initiatives can I take? And here we have some examples. And what would be, let's say, the impact of these initiatives? Let's just mention some of them. And again, like I said, we will not get into the detail of all these topics. We will come back to that in any other meeting sessions, trainings, webinars, but to give you an idea. And actually, my tip here is look at the initiatives, and there will be more initiatives that you can come up with. And let's say, determine what you think that you can realize. Of course, the first is always do not use vehicles. The cleanest kilometer is the kilometer not driven. So always start with, do I really need a vehicle? And if you really need it, then look at cleaner vehicles. So if you say, okay, what would it mean if I would change my vehicles to a different type of vehicles with lower emissions? So how much can I reduce in my emissions if I shift 20% of my vehicles to a different type of vehicle? Vehicle sharing. I will come back to that a little later. Vehicle sharing. So work together within your organization or with other organizations to share trips. Say, okay, we both need to go in the same direction. We both need to go to the airport because there's a plane with people that we need to pick up. So work together and only send one vehicle instead of 2 vehicles if you only need to pick up 3 people, for example. Right profiling. Do you really need a heavy-duty 4x4 vehicle if you mainly use it in an urban environment? So don't over-profile your vehicle. So don't have a vehicle that is capable of doing more than it needs to do. Because if you do that, it means that the vehicle, in most cases, will use more fuel, is more polluting. Eco-driving, train your drivers or coach your drivers. The last topic here in how to drive in a more, let's say, fuel efficient way. And of course, journey planning is also important. Here, without going into detail, these are some initiatives. Important is that you get an idea on what does it mean if I would do eco-driving? What does it mean if I would change my fleet to a different type of vehicles? So what can I realize in the next 1, 3, 5 years in reduction of emissions, and use that as your target? Okay. Important here, whether you set a baseline, whether you determine, let's say, the impact of the different initiatives, it's impossible to have it completely perfect. Even worse, it will be imperfect. Your first baseline will not be the best baseline you will ever make. The first target that you will determine will not be the best target set that you will ever do. Important is just start. You will never be completely ready to have the best baseline ever of the best target setting ever. But important is just start somewhere, start with calculating a baseline, and then you will realize once you have it and start working on it that you can improve on it. Okay, that's baseline and targets. Again, all organizations, no, most organizations in our community, so most of the organizations that are present here in the call as well, committed to the fact that this year they will all have a baseline set and a target for at least the largest fleets in the organization. So that means that those of you who are responsible for a fleet in a country, you will probably deal with your focal point at headquarters, whether you're global fleet manager, global fleet director, logistics manager, to see what the target could be for your specific country. The other two, cleaner vehicles, vehicle sharing. So looking at cleaner vehicles, what we know is that there are, let's say, alternatives. And alternatives, cleaner vehicles, in most cases do, let's say, meet your requirements. Okay, and I see that Gilles wants to know if there's a French version. Gilles, you might have missed my first invitation. I will send it again to everyone, and then you can see, let's say, you have a subtitle in French as well. Okay. Cleaner vehicles. Like I said, most of the time, the cleaner vehicles will meet your requirements. So the most of the vehicles that you use, that most organizations use at this moment, are Euro 0 or pre-Euro, let's say, with a very low emission standard. That means that they are quite polluting, and in many cases also more polluting than is needed. Because there are more and more vehicles on the market, smaller city vehicles, for example. If you mainly drive in the city or around the city, so you don't need off-road capabilities of a vehicle, which is in more and more places the case, then just city vehicles, and especially smaller city vehicles, will reduce your emissions substantially. So look into it whether you can use smaller vehicles. What we see now is that Euro 3 vehicles, also heavy-duty Euro 3 vehicles, are available on the market. As many of you know, TGS announced last year that they have a new Euro 3 Land Cruiser, which is a vehicle that is used by a lot of you, and there's a Euro 3 emission standard Land Cruiser available now as well, which is great news and a big step up. Electric vehicles. What we see, based on experience with some organizations who already deploy electric vehicles, that it's definitely possible in environments, again, where you don't need strong off-road capabilities. Electric vehicles can definitely do the job, like hybrid vehicles as well. And yes, there are a lot of lessons learned and lessons to be learned, but these cleaner vehicles, in most cases, are on the market. And secondly, also meet the requirements that you need for the specific circumstances. So see what you can do as the cleanest vehicle possible in the environment in where you operate. Then looking at vehicle sharing. Actually, and that's the reason, let's say, the two reasons why you see, why did we have, let's say, as a commitment, Euro 3 vehicles and vehicle sharing, because they both have a huge impact on reduction of emissions. Euro 3 vehicles, like I said, there's more and more cleaner vehicles available on the market. So this is the moment to, let's say, start procuring cleaner vehicles once your vehicles are up for replacement. And secondly, vehicle sharing is actually the easiest way to reduce your emissions, and not your emissions, but also your costs. And next to your cost also will increase road safety. We know that there's a lot of barriers to not step into vehicle sharing. But if you think about it from a technical, practical perspective, the only thing you need to do is work together within your organization, with other projects, for example, or with other organizations, to see whether you can share trips. Don't make it complicated. Don't wait until you have a full-fledged setup of vehicle sharing yet ready. Just start with easy trips, like I mentioned before, airport trips. In many capitals, let's say there are a couple of planes a day, and in that plane, there's a lot of people from different organizations or from the same organization with different projects. And what we still do is that we send a vehicle to pick up a person or two persons. So in many cases, we can share vehicles, share trips, send one vehicle to pick up 3 people from different organizations or different projects. And that is a very easy way to reduce your emissions, because instead of 2, you only, let's say, send 1 vehicle. And that's why we say it's the easiest way. You don't need to procure new vehicles. You don't need to do anything else apart from working together with other people and see if you can share specific trips. Again, start somewhere. You will never be ready to have like I said, a full-fledged vehicle sharing process scheme ready, but just start somewhere, build on it, and improve it. Okay. So these are the 3, let's say, commitments: baseline and target setting, vehicle sharing, and cleaner vehicles. So what are we going to do as a community to achieve the commitments in a nutshell? And we will come back to, throughout the whole year, you will see more of that. We will do a biannual survey to get insight and progress of commitments. That survey, we will do it with the global, let's say, responsible people of fleet within all your organizations. We will update the Clean Fleet Toolkit, because we will use that to monitor progress of reduction of fleet emissions. So in the coming months, we will work on an update on the Clean Fleet Toolkit. Again, also, and we will all do that with member organizations together. The same with a best practice sharing platform. We will see how we can transform our current knowledge platform to a platform which we can really share best practices, lessons learned, good technical examples of organizations to be shared in one platform. There will be a working group on vehicle sharing to see, okay, what needs to be done to really get an uptake on vehicle sharing within all organizations. We will discuss and work together with donors and with suppliers. Suppliers specifically is how can they support organizations with their waste disposal of vehicles, but also waste of, let's say, vehicle waste, maintenance of vehicles. Let's say, how can they support organizations in a way that that waste can be processed in a sustainable way? And we will have quarterly meetings with the focal points of all the headquarters of the member organizations. Okay, so one where we think that you can all play a role, because cleaner vehicles, vehicle sharing, it's different methods, but actually if you look at how you can reduce emissions, again, the best way to reduce emissions is to not drive. Avoid driving. The cleanest kilometer is the kilometer not driven. So look at whether you can avoid the need for travel. Whether you say, okay, we do online meetings instead of going somewhere, for example, that's a way to avoid, or that any other way that you can say, I can avoid. The first question is always, do I really need to travel? If you do need to travel, see, can you use other modes? Like you can walk maybe, or you can vehicle share, trip share, you use public transport, any other way that you can do. And if you say, no, I cannot avoid and I cannot shift, I still need to use vehicles, and in that case, look at what you can do. What you do to, let's say, improve the energy efficiency of the vehicles, whether more fuel efficient vehicles, whether electric vehicles, other types of vehicles, as long as they are cleaner than the current ones you use. In a nutshell, some of the tips I use: just start, don't wait until you're completely ready, but experience, just test new initiatives, learn from it, work together with others, and based on that, improve. Look at initiatives that are most impactful, that you can see, where you can have the most impact, and focus on these initiatives. Again, don't forget, the cleanest kilometer is the kilometer not driven. To try to avoid driving, use the smallest and cleanest vehicles possible. Use the Fleetform Clean Fleet Toolkit. We have vehicle sharing initiatives already in Lebanon and CAR. You can join them if you are in these countries, or you can start collaborating in your own country. Waste management, ask if you buy a new vehicle, how, let's say, suppliers can support you with your waste management. And then keep an eye on Fleetform's new initiatives in the coming months. Green Me, an initiative to work together with other fleet managers in countries to learn from each other, to share ideas. And Green Coaching, how do you coach your drivers in a way that they become much more eco-friendly, let's say, drivers. And again, start. Okay. This was the famous Don Shula, famous American football coach, who said, it's the start that stops most people. Realize that. Just start somewhere, learn from it, and build on it. So in this year, in our webinars, we will definitely focus on these 3 topics. We'll come back in webinars in different shape and forms, in order, let's say, to support you with experience, with examples, with showcases, etc., etc. Okay. I will leave it here, and let's see, there is still some room for questions and answers. Moses said, I used the Clean Fleet Toolkit the day before yesterday to get my baseline, but the tool did not give me recommendation. How can I get my recommendation? Well, the tool should give it to you, or at least, let's say, for the baseline, Moses, is the tool gives you an insight in what's your current, let's say, what's your current emissions. That is the first purpose of the tool. Based on your fleet, you get an insight in your carbon emissions, but also in other emissions. So that's your baseline effect. And if you change your fleet within a year or half a year from now, if you've changed your fleet, you can do it again, and then you can see what the difference is in your emissions. Recommendations should give it to you. So I will look at that, why that does not happen. I come back to you, Moses, that V1 as well, because it should give you some recommendations as well. Okay. Are there any other questions? Let's see. I see in the chat. That's why fleet efficiency is related to driving more kilometers, whereas sustainability suggests reducing kilometer coverage. What's your opinion on it? Yeah, if you say fleet efficiency is related to drive more kilometers, that is related to, yes, drive as much kilometers as possible with a single vehicle. So the utilization of a single vehicle goes up. That is very efficient. If you, for example, do vehicle sharing, it means that where you have two vehicles now and you only use one vehicle, that one vehicle will be used more. So that means the utilization rate goes up. It means your cost will go down as well. It also means that you need less vehicles. So in that sense, it is very much related to each other. So yes, reducing kilometers overall is a great way to reduce emissions. But the kilometers you still need to drive, do that as limited number of vehicles as possible. So there is a relation between fleet efficiency and reducing kilometer coverage. If you reduce your kilometers, you need less vehicles. If you also make it more efficient by using individual vehicles more, you can further reduce the size of your fleet. So that's what my opinion is. Rebecca, as the Clean Fleet Toolkit requires data on waste, and I think the current fleet form cost follow-up document doesn't capture this data, is there a plan to update the CFU table to have the data available? That's a complicated question, Rebecca. You say the Clean Fleet Toolkit requires data on waste. The current fleet form cost follow-up document doesn't capture this data. I will take that offline with you because I think that's two tools, different tools, so the Clean Fleet Toolkit and the total cost of ownership tool. So I have to understand exactly what you mean here. So I will take that offline with you, Rebecca. Thank you for the question. Vera, what's your taking on using ACs within the city? Any impact? Use of AC always has an impact because it means more fuel consumption and therefore also a higher consumption. It's always a balance. If you can avoid using an AC, don't use an AC. Whether it's in the city or outside the city, don't use it. At the same time, if it's so hot that not using an AC means that, for example, the driver can become more fatigued, then you should use it because then you have to balance, let's say, emissions with road safety. So starting point is don't use ACs, but also at the same time is the moment that it becomes dangerous to not use an AC, of course, you have to use the AC. Okay, cool. We are at the end of this webinar of today. It's great that you all were here with us in the first webinar of this year. So thank you. The recording will be available if you want to share it with colleagues. You will get an email with a link to the recording, also with a link to, let's say, the review of this webinar. So rate our webinar is just one click, and some links to documents that we discussed today. Again, thank you, and we will hope to see you in one of our next webinars this year. Okay, thank you and bye-bye.